May 29, 1953 marked a historical event in the mountaineering history. Hillary and Norgay became the first men to successfully summit Mount Everest. As a proof of their success, they presented this photo to the world. After 70 years from their summit, when we look back to all the Everest summit expeditions, this question always remains as a mystery. Are they really the first ones to reach the peak of Mount Everest? Some believe the summit in 1953 is not actually the first, but it was the second summit. The chances of someone already claimed the Everest nearly 30 years before 1953 is quite possible. George Mallory and Andrew Irvine, two members of the 1924 British expedition, may have been the first ones to reach the peak of Everest. This is the story of a century-old mystery. On the 8th of June, 1924, George Mallory and Andrew Irvine were making preparations for their summit to the world's tallest mountain. Prior to 1924, Mallory have already tried to reach the top of Everest 2 times. In 1921, George Mallory and Guy Bullock set off on a British expedition to survey the Everest, with Mallory becoming the first European to set foot on the mountain. They made it to just over 7,000 meters, but were unprepared to go further. However, on this expedition, the two climbers found what they thought might be a route to the top from the North Col, and made note of it for future expeditions. In 1922, Mallory tried this route again, once again making it no further than the North Col before being forced to turn back. This time, however, he got caught in an avalanche, losing 7 porters, and nearly dying himself. The knowledge gained from previous expeditions helped Mallory to make better plans for 1924. Irvine was a 22-year-old undergraduate student who had 0 high-altitude climbing experience but was a great sportsman, having been an accomplished rower in his university, and had incredible engineering knowledge, being an expert at repairing the supplemental oxygen equipment used by the British mountain expeditions. With the help of Irvine, Mallory was able to increase the functionality and strength of the oxygen tanks, designing a tank that weighed 5 pounds less than usual ones. Previous experiences had made it clear to Mallory that oxygen is the key for them to reach the top of the Everest, where there is only about 30% of oxygen. After several days of ascending the face of Everest, on June 7, both Mallory and Irvine had climbed up to 8,168 meters on the eve of their final push to take the summit in order to set up a small camp, after which Sherpa guides were sent to tell the rest of the expedition who were at another camp farther down the mountain that they planned to reach the peak the following morning. The next day, on June 8, 1924, Mallory and Irvine set out for the summit of Everest in clear conditions. Although the last person to see them, team geologist Noel Odell, who watched through a telescope, noticed that something must have gone less smoothly than planned as the pair began their ascent at 12:50 in the afternoon rather than the early morning hours that they had originally stated. Nevertheless, Odell reported that the two climbers appeared to be climbing strongly and reached a place at around 8,604 meters called the second step, just below the summit pyramid, without incident. Odell felt sure at the time that they would have no trouble reaching their goal, but then a thick bank of sudden clouds and mist enveloped them and they were lost to view. This picture was the last picture taken before they left the camp. This is the last time anyone saw them alive. And so began the greatest mystery of mountaineering. Did George Mallory and Andrew Irvine reach the summit of Everest in 1924? A full 29 years before Sir Edmund Hillary and Sherpa Tenzing Norgay? No one but Mallory and Irvine knows for sure what happened on that fateful day. No one can say with any degree of certainty that they reached the top on June 8, 1924, and likewise no one can say with any degree of certainty that they did not reach the top. However, there are a few key pieces of evidence that might help solve the mystery of what happened to Mallory and Irvine. In 1933, a member of the 4th British Everest expedition by the name of Percy Wynne Harris found an ice axe at around 8,460 meters, which it was determined must have belonged to Irvine due to the characteristic 3 nick marks that he was known to put on his belongings. Later testing and scouring of diaries and equipment logs showed that it was Irvine's axe. Why an ice axe, an invaluable piece of equipment, was left behind a decent distance from where it was expected to be is anyone's guess. There have various theories regarding the ice axe, including that it was evidence of the scene of a fall, that it had been dropped accidentally, or that it had simply been placed there to be picked up again on the way back down. In 1960, a Chinese climber found what he described as a body sitting upright in the shelter of a rock on the northeast ridge, the approach that Mallory and Irvine would have been using. Once again, very few European climbers would have used this route, largely because access to it had been closed in the 1950s by the Chinese government. Any European bodies at that altitude must have gotten there before that time. This body has not been rediscovered ever since after that. More than 40 years passed and nothing else was discovered on the mountain. Then a rumor reached the West that in 1975 a Chinese climber had stumbled across a body at 8,200 meters on a sloping terrace in the middle of the north face directly below the site of that ice axe. It's a report that has never been officially confirmed. Could it be that the Chinese are perhaps unwilling to invite speculation into Mallory and Irvine simply because that might cast doubt on their claim to have made the first ascent of the North Ridge? In 1999 an expedition set out to retrace Mallory and Irvine's steps in the hopes of proving once and for all whether or not they reached the summit back in 1924. Everest is easily one of the most challenging places on planet Earth to mount a search effort, and yet on the first day scouring their chosen site the team hit the jackpot. They didn't just find a few subtle old clues hidden here and there, they found George Mallory. Although Mallory's body has been found, Irvine's never has. The 1999 expedition found several interesting clues, of which Mallory's body was not the least. This expedition found Mallory and Irvine's oxygen bottles along the first step, along with evidence that they hadn't been functioning properly. This suggests any number of terrifying possibilities, as oxygen is extremely important for climbers at high altitude. Without it, the two men would have been sluggish in their responses at best, and unable to function at worst. Also interesting was the evidence of how Mallory died. Severe rope jerk injuries show that he fell, but was caught, at least initially. What ultimately killed him, though, were the numerous other fall injuries he'd gotten, including head trauma. It's absolutely clear that at some point, Mallory fell, and that caused his death. However, the injuries from the fall were not the only injuries he, or possibly Irvine, sustained. Blood on Mallory's collar matched a pattern of blotting an injury rather than of bleeding freely, suggesting that one of the two men had been injured before the fall. How this influenced the climb, no one knows. But what offers the most tantalizing clues about the climb are Mallory's personal effects. On his personal effects was his snow goggles, which were found in his pocket, which seems to suggest he was heading down the face at night since they would have been necessary in the blinding white of the daytime snow. A nighttime or early evening descent would seem to suggest that he was on his way down from reaching the summit at a late time, which coincides with their unexpectedly late departure. It is thought that if they had not reached the summit, then it would be unlikely Mallory would still be at that high location at such a late hour, although it could also mean that he was coming down after he had simply given up trying and failing. He was also found with his watch, rope, and equipment lists. However, there was one thing that was missing, that has fueled speculation more. Mallory carried a picture of his wife up the mountain with him, promising her that if he reached the summit, he would leave it there, burying it under the snow so she could be there with him as well. That picture was not with him. This doesn't automatically mean that he buried it on the top of the mountain. Perhaps at some point he took it out of his coat to look at it and it blew away or got lost. But it is a tantalizing clue nonetheless. The only clue that would solve the mystery at this point would be to find Irvine, and find the camera that he carried with him. Irvine, however, has not yet been found despite several expeditions. In 2019, author and climber Mark Sinnott visited the spot on the north face of Everest where Mallory's body was found in a bid to find the VPK and Irvine's body. Sinnott climbed to the GPS coordinates but found nothing there despite also using advanced drones to aid him in his search. He later confirmed the rumors and outlines he heard after publishing his book. He writes,
I kept hearing rumors that explained why I didn't find Irvine. The Chinese had found his body in the camera long ago and then buried the story. An official with the Chinese Tibet Mountaineering Association told a Nepali friend of mine in the fall of 2019 that the rumors were true. The camera was kept under lock and key, with other Mallory and Irvine artifacts, in a museum in China.
Sinnott alleges that the Chinese wanted to keep the success of Mallory and Irvine's climb a secret so that the Chinese team was able to take credit for the first successful climb. As of today, they are gone. And for now the mystery must be left unanswered. But bearing in mind all the circumstances, considering their position when last seen and given Mallory's strength and determination, I like to think that Mallory and Irvine saw the view from the top of the world before the end. Hopefully sometime in future, or maybe next year where it marks the 100th year anniversary of the incident, the truth will be revealed. Until then, it is an unsolved mystery. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this video interesting. If you did, please give this video thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for future content. Thank you once again for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video.